Okay, so I'm starting the recording and that's what you'll be able to access. You'll get information on the link to that sometime tomorrow. That's the same thing that happened last month. So how did everybody do with last month's houses? Did you have any issues? Shake your head or no? All is good? Oh, Debbie's holding hers up. That's great. Okay, so as you can see, so this is month 2 and there's going to be house number 4 and house number 5. Although house number 5 is really townhouses. So I've got that here over my left shoulder, the block. And as you can see, I have also done some of the applique. I haven't finished all of the applique, but that's at the bottom of the quilt and I literally ran out of time. I didn't leave myself enough time this month to do that. But, and it also takes a little while to do the stitching around the snowflakes. There's a lot of pivoting, but that's okay. I enjoy machine applique, so that is all right. Is the position of the camera still all right for everybody okay, that's wonderful. Now I remember last month that you wanted to know from each house what fabrics were used for which pieces. So I'm going to start with that because I think in your kits, they're not labeled quite the same. It'll say like for house number 4 and like that. But anyway, so starting off with house number 4 in your pattern, A is the first one, which is the roof. And the roof on that is this blue fabric here that you'll have 2 in your kit. There's a slightly lighter shade, but that's used in house number 5. Okay, so this is the one this is the only piece you're going to cut from that is A, which is the roof for house number 4. Okay. Then when it comes to the actual house itself, you're going to have this fabric. It looks like I don't know what you call it. They're sort of blossoms, but they almost look like they're the dandelions or something like that because of the white that's on it. And from that, for your house, you're going to be cutting the pieces that are B, C, and D. Okay, and there's multiples of those pieces, so because the pieces aren't that large. All right. Then the next piece, which is F. F is the windows. So this is the same fabric that I am using in the border on this particular quilt. So there's blue squares with little gold dots in between the squares. So I've used that for windows. The one comment I want to make about this fabric when you are cutting the windows, try to pay attention to that, make sure that your squares are actually straight so that when you do piece them into your windows that the squares aren't going slightly off on an angle. You know, even if it feels like you're cutting just slightly off grain, don't worry about that. I would be more concerned about the design. You want to clearly see your windows, the squares nice and straight in that. Okay, so just, pay attention to that. Then E is the little strip that is going in between there. And that is just sort of a pale ivory colored fabric, and it's like little circles on that. I think on the video it's going to appear sort of whitish, but it's very pale. Okay, and you'll have just one piece of that, more of a longer narrow strip. Okay. And then the background is, it's a white Tuscana, so it looks like it's kind of shaded, like a tone on tone, but a regular, I think that's fairly self-explanatory on that one. Okay, and that you're cutting your G pieces. There's 2 G squares. Okay. So like last month with the roof, when you are cutting or sewing the roof, you're starting off with a rectangle of the blue fabric there, your A piece, and then your 2 G pieces, which are the background fabric, where you draw a diagonal line. I'm trying to figure out how to hold this here. that on there, and that's what they're asking you to sew. That's where, again, like last month, I also drew a separate line a 1/2 inch away from that, and I stitched both lines, okay? And I would press this up before I would trim it, just to make sure that have a nice 90-degree corner yet at your roof. Really what you're making for the roof is a flying geese block, okay? Now the reason that I've done this because I'm frugal and I don't like to just waste those triangles. So from my roof, when I trimmed it, this is my extra triangle that I have. And then I can size this up. So there's an extra 1/2 square triangle. So you're going to have 2 of them from just this particular house block from house number 4. Okay, that's if you wish to do that. You don't have to. I just thought I'd point that out because it's easier to sew it when it's still in a shape like this. You don't have any bias that you're dealing with, okay? And then once I've pressed this up and I know that I've still got that 90-degree corner, I would cut in between a 1/4 inch. So the 1/4 inch will be a 1/2, right in the middle between those 2 lines that I've stitched. Okay, and then I just repress it over, and so that's your roof, just to let you know on that. Now on this particular house, this is one where you've got a straight piece of fabric. Then where the windows are sewn in, you've got multiple pieces. And it's really important on those to make sure that they are straight, not only when you're sewing, but also when you are pressing it. And I press after each seam that I've sewn. And I'm pressing, this is a miniature one. So I'm pressing each one away from the windows. I want the windows to be recessed. Okay, so my seams are pressed to the dark fabric in this. But when you're sewing, make sure that when you line them up here, that these pieces are still straight and they're straight across here for when you're doing your 1/4 inch. Because you want to keep this straight, and then when you press it, you still want to make sure that this is nice and straight, because we're not making crooked houses here. We're trying not to anyway. Okay, that makes sense? And then when they're joined together, because you want this to be the same length as the straight single piece of fabric that you're joining it to. The other thing to be conscious of when you are going along, because you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 of these, and you've got 3 sets of windows in between, you want to make sure that the windows do line up so that you don't have one set that's slightly above or below the other. If you find that as you have pieced that this piece is perhaps a little bit longer, or all of these 3 are a bit longer than the ones in between, go ahead and trim them so they are the same length if you don't want to resew the seam allowance. But still make sure that the windows line up, because whether you have this amount of fabric there, I think this finishes 1 inch. If yours finishes like 1 inch and a 1/16 or a little bit less, I mean, no one's going to know. It's more the consistency. Okay, and then your house goes together. The pattern is written very well on that. When I add these pieces here, again, I'm pressing away from the window. So I have pressed these seams. I'm going to move this here. I have pressed them to that piece in between, the one straight piece. So really the windows, if you looked at it from all 4 seams that surround it, is going to be furthest back. It's really recessed, okay? Alrighty, any questions on that particular house there? Is that okay? I've got some shaking heads, that's wonderful. Okay, then we can move on to house number 5, which is on the other side, which really are townhouses. The one thing I wanted to point out, when you get through patterns in the months now like that, you're going to have to hang on to them for the next class. Like on the last page for block number 2, on the opposite side is the first part of month 3. It's house 6. Okay, I just want to draw your attention to that. That's just how the patterns were printed, and because you're getting them piecemeal, there's nothing we could do about that. We didn't want to start photocopying patterns, pages and like, anyway. So that's going to continue to happen in subsequent months where you're going to, at the end of that particular month or that block, on the reverse side is going to be the first house of the next month. It's just how it happened on there. Okay. So for house number 5, again, what I've done here is you've got 3 sets of fabrics for the houses. So you've got the blue one with stars. You've got the same print, it's just a slightly lighter shade than what was used on the roof for house number 4, but that little branch print. And then you've got the stripe. Okay, so because these are townhouses, I have cut the same pieces from each of these fabrics. But when I assembled the houses, I mixed them up. So really all I'm mixing up is that. So the stripe that I cut for the roof is on a different base. Okay, and so forth. And see, I've put the blue above the stripe and then the stars. From there, that star roof is on top of just that, the plain one with branches on it. You don't have to mix them up in the same manner that I did. You can mix them up differently. If you choose not to mix them, that's okay too. You are constructing your block, so it really doesn't matter from that point of view. But I wanted to point out what I've done on my sample anyway. Okay, so from those 3 fabrics, you're going to be cutting A, B, C, and D. So from each one of those, you're going to be cutting as those same pieces. All right. Like I said, how you mix them up afterwards. The one thing I do want to draw your attention to is the stripe fabric. What I have chosen to do, and again, you can decide for yourself too which way you want to go on that, is for the townhouse itself, I cut it so that the stripes are running horizontal. And then when I cut the piece for the roof, I cut it with the stripes running vertical. Again, you can choose to do whichever way you want to go on that one. It doesn't really matter. Again, you're constructing your block, so that's all right. Okay, but I wanted to make you aware of that. The only reason that I did the house itself on a horizontal, first of all, I'm using the stripe in various places throughout the quilt, and I like to change it up so it doesn't look exactly the same. But the other thing is with the stripes running on a horizontal is just to make the house visually look a little wider. You know how they say if you want to make your hips slimmer, you want to have stripes running, vertical instead of horizontal. So basically I've used that same principle when I chose to do that for the house. Again, it's up to you how you want to do that. I just wanted you to be aware of it. The other thing is I tried very much to do, just like when cutting the windows here, is to make sure that your stripes are straight. You don't want to have your stripes running, on a slight angle. It would be different, but that just wanted to make you aware of that. And I didn't find that a difficult thing to do with the striped fabric at all, so. Okay. So that's those. F, you're going to have this white fabric with little blue dots. That's for your doors on the houses. So each house is the same. So it's a blue with a little white with a little blue dot. Then for E, there's going to be a gold. It's the same print as the 2 blues that you have there. It looks like little branches. And so those are for the windows, so the E. Then the background is has little tiny X's. So it's a bit of a warm, it's not really yellow, but it is definitely a warm ivory color, and there's little tiny X's on that fabric. And from that, you're cutting G and H. And that should use up all of the fabric that you received in your kit. Okay. So for the townhouses, it's very much when you're constructing the roofs of them, it's exactly the same process as for our house number 4, and that you're making a flying geese block for each of the roofs. In this particular case, I didn't do the extra stitching line, which I just, there it is. I didn't do the same where I stitched a 1/2 inch, away again, because the piece was going to be smaller than what I wish to save. That doesn't mean, you can't do that. You certainly can. It's easier to sew, like I said, at this point, rather than cutting off triangles and trying to reline them up later and sew them. So again, that's up to you. I just didn't save those because I thought they'd be too tiny. And as much as I like to work with small things, I decided I wasn't going to on that particular one. But the construction process is exactly the same, where you sew one square on the diagonal, you press it over, then trim it, and you have to do that before you can add the second one. Okay. The same thing with here, except you don't have as many pieces there when you're lining up the door with the house bits in between and then your window. Again, you want to make sure that that is the same length as the piece that you're adding beside it. Once you have all of that done, you're just putting your roofs on and you put all your houses together. And then you have another additional piece of background, which is cut larger. And that's going to be on the top there. What I do encourage you to do when you have pieces, and not necessarily cut them in order, but I usually cut my bigger pieces out of your fabric first before I cut the smaller ones. There's the odd time, if depending on how you cut the smaller ones, you then are not able to get the bigger piece out. So if you do it the opposite way, usually you should be just fine with that. So you can see on here, I've done some of the applique. I'll move to the side so you can see the branch on the other side that also has 2 birds on it, sort of thing. So you have an idea of what's coming up at the end of the quilt. Okay, once you have, house number 4 and house number 5 completed, you can sew them together like it tells you there, which completes block number 2. And at that point, you actually can join it to block number 1 that you've completed from last month. And that is going to be the top row of this particular quilt. There's no other additions that are needed in between. You can just piece them together, and or you can leave them separate, that's up to you. But at some point, you're just going to be sewing them together. And all we're talking is one seam down here, because this is month 1, number 1 here, which ends with that star sashing in between, and then adding that. Okay, any questions from anybody?
Yes, I have a question. So I have not done, pre-done these blocks for number 5, but I'm looking at what you've indicated we need to cut out. And from each block, we need a rectangle 2.5 by 4.5, and then 2 strips 2 by 7.5. Well, my block is 8 inches by 6. So that's too small to get all those pieces out.
Okay, just a minute here.
Unless I'm really brain dead today.
2, 4, and I could have made a mistake on my calculation when I was doing the fabric that you need. So 2.5, so 2 of that, that's 4 inches, it takes 4 of that, which only leaves you 2 inches. Yeah, you're right, Barb. I should have double checked that when I did that. I've added up the numbers incorrectly on there.
So that'll be for all the houses then on number 5.
Yes, it will. Yeah, so
Okay.
that's going to affect those 3 fabrics. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring that to Sarah's attention and have her cut an extra piece for each of you. And I'll let you decide if you want to pick that up before next month's kit or whether you want to just include it with next month's kit. I do apologize for that because that's going to affect everybody. Thank you for noting that already beforehand, though. I did not.
Gloria, which pieces are we talking about?
We are talking about the 3 for the houses. So it's the one with the stars
Okay,
and that and the stripes. Okay, so it's those 3 fabrics because you would have received the same size piece. I mean, you can cut out what you were able to for them and, you know, work at that way. If you can't get, for instance, the roof piece out, if you get the rest of it out, which I think you would be able to, no problem. You could construct at least the house itself and you'll just be missing the roof piece and then like that. I think that's what I'll do. So I'll get Sarah to cut you a piece where you're able to get the rectangle out for each of the roofs.
It's my turn to go now.
well, we'll see.
Okay, the rest should be fine. Okay, I will make a note of that once we're done.
Extra half an inch.
Thanks, Barb, for picking up on that. I'm human.
Gloria,
Better you than me.
Oh. Yeah,
Gloria, can you have it that we can pick it up so that we can have our homework done?
yes,
Okay.
yes, I will let Sarah know that. And she'll have it separate, and whether you get it with next month's or you pick it up beforehand, I think that is entirely up to you at your convenience, of course. So, and it would be just picking up a piece of fabric. You're not going to be paying extra for that or anything, so. All righty,
All righty.
all I have for you this month. I think by next month it'll be after Easter, so I'm going to wish you all a happy Easter.
Happy
you.
Easter.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. So,
You sign.
yeah, if you,
Can you do the bunny flag?
oh, that's okay. I get the bunny ears. All right. Thanks, Shar.
Thank you, Gloria.
That's coming from an elementary school teacher. So there we go. Okay. Thank you, everybody, and have a good month, and we'll see you next month online.
Okay. Thank
Okay,
you.
Thanks,
thanks.
Gloria.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Couldn't resist that.
Okay, bye. Well, it still says recording. Yeah. I didn't hit stop soon enough. I hit where it says stop, but, and now we hit, yes.